Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, today to my reaction to Robert Kubica news. And today is going to be a slightly different video today. It's going to just be a reaction video to Robert Kubica, obviously, announcing that he's going to depart ways from Williams at the end of 2019. And as of 2019, Robert will no longer be a Formula One driver for Williams, at least. Robert didn't say what he's going to go on to do next. However, I'm going to, today in this video, give my reaction and then give my thoughts on what could happen next. Later on down the line, both for Williams and for Robert Kubica, in what will happen next. So the first question I think we should ask ourselves, is it the right move for Williams and for Robert? Personally, for Robert, I think yes. And I think for Williams, I think yes. I don't think, 2019 has been quite the dream comeback year Robert dreamed it would have been. Obviously, I think, he can be proud of himself. Robert can be. But I don't think it's the comeback year he would have wanted or would have dreamed of. Especially if it was me as a Formula One driver. Now, Robert Kubica, picked up his first win at the 2008 Canadian Grand Prix. A season after, Lewis Hamilton picked up his first win at the Canadian Grand Prix. And obviously, Robert Kubica is a part of that group, I would say. He's a part of this group that is Vettel. I would probably put Bottas in there, maybe. Ricciardo, Raikkonen, Hamilton. That's who Kubica's a part of these four people. Maybe Grosjean, and I wouldn't say Magnussen, but I'd say certainly Grosjean, Vettel, Ricciardo, Bottas, Hamilton, and Raikkonen are sort of all part of this group, and Kubica's a part of that. When they came into Formula One, they sort of came into Formula One very similar times to one another, and they competed for race wins at very similar times together overall. Especially Robert Kubica, Hamilton, and Vettel. You could say they are the three amigos, really. Them three in particular. All three of them came into Formula One at the exact same time. I think Robert came into Formula One, if I'm correct, in 2006. Or same year as Hamilton. I'm pretty sure it was 2006, the Hungarian Grand Prix. Obviously, Vettel came into Formula One at the 2007 USA Grand Prix, and Hamilton came into Formula One at the 2007 Australian Grand Prix. So they've all come into Formula One within in the space of a year of one another overall. Now, we all know what happened. Robert had that crash, of course. And obviously, since then, he's been a changed man, you could say. He's the only actual disabled current driver on the grid. And he is disabled because, as a disability goes, a disability doesn't have to be mental. It can also be a physical one. And his is a physical disability, as he's got in his, I believe it's his right arm, a limitation, because, the feeling in his right arm isn't quite the same as it would be in your left arm or in a normal arm, due to the crash that he had back in 2011. And Robert Kubica is one of them class acts. Obviously, he came back into Formula One, as we know, back in 2017, or that's when he started circling back into Formula One as a test driver and as a reserve driver for Williams and Renault. Originally, the plan, I believe, was to go to Renault, but Renault didn't feel he had the ability. Fair enough, that's their own opinion. And then, obviously, went off to Williams, and he got back into Formula One through the Williams team, of course. And then in 2018, at the end of the season, it was announced that Robert would partner George Russell for the 2019 Formula One season. And there was a bit of a contest between himself and Latifi, and it was announced that Robert got the drive overall. And now, in 2019, obviously, he's going to have the whole season back in Formula 1, which is good. And I think it's a real good story to see that no matter what your limitations are, you can make it to Formula 1's or to the pinnacle of motorsport, because that's what Formula 1 is. It is the pinnacle of motorsport. Let's face facts. And, obviously, I think that's really, really good to see. That no matter what your limitations are, you can make it to the top of motorsport. And that's really what Kubica did and achieved through coming back to Formula 1 in 2019. Yes, okay, it hasn't been arguably and admittedly his best season. He's not really been up to par with Russell on average. Yes, he's scored 1 point in Germany, but in very fortunate circumstances. And we're still waiting to see whether the appeal of Alfa Romeo will be successful even then. And if it is, then obviously we know, that Kubica would be stripped of that point. Hamilton, I believe, would be stripped also of his points that he scored in that Grand Prix as well. So, obviously, if that appeal is successful for Alfa Romeo, obviously, then that's something else to talk about. But neither here or there, Robert hasn't been, I don't think, quite good enough for Formula 1 in 2019. And as Hamilton said, we should be seeing the 20 best drivers on the grid. Is Kubica really the 20th best driver on the grid? I don't know. It's a real tough one to say, because it's easy to say, oh, yes, he's, a Formula 1 driver. He's one of the best. That's why he's on the grid, of course. But at the same time, the facts are, did he do a good enough job in 2019? Personally, I don't think he has. I think, most of the time, I know most of the time, obviously, we know that Russell's been out qualifying him. It's like 12-0 or something, and Russell mainly outraces him, in most races as well. So, is it the right decision for Williams? I think it is, because the thing is, if you give George Russell an easy time at Williams, don't get me wrong, he's not going to improve, much. Yes, he'll get naturally better and better each season goes by, but he needs a challenge, like all drivers. I think what they did with Vettel at Ferrari is only good, and really, Vettel can only improve learning off Leclerc and Leclerc learning off Sebastian. And the same could be said at, Mercedes. Mercedes got two good drivers that can win races, that can get pole positions, And obviously, therefore, if this is the case, if both drivers can succeed at Mercedes, therefore you've got a good lineup. And the same could be said for most teams on the grid. Like, look at Red Bull, or look at Renault or Haas or most teams on that grid. Most of the teams and drivers, are good enough to compete for championship winning points and for points on the grid. So, obviously, as I say, whilst there's a good factor there that Robert made it back into Formula 1, I think it is only the right decision for Williams to partner ways and go their own separate ways at the end of the season. So what does this mean for, firstly, I think, Robert Kubica? Well, for Robert, it means he won't be driving, I don't think, in 2019. And I think, 2020. And I think, that's only fair enough. Look, if Robert came back into Formula 1, I think, he came back into Formula 1 to be in a good car, and Williams ain't going to be a good car next season. Is there any other opportunities for him further up the grid, or is there anywhere where he could go beyond 2020, like in Formula 1? Not really. Like, all the top teams and top drivers are locked out for 2020. Williams aren't going to be a top team, I don't think, unless they have a remarkable turnaround in the winter. So, obviously, in terms of, seeing a Williams compete for the championship, it's not realistic. Obviously, Ferrari's got Vettel and Leclerc, Mercedes got Bottas and Hamilton, Red Bull's got Verstappen, Kvyat or Albon. So, the top teams for 2020 are more or less locked out, and there is no way he's going to make it into a top team. A midfield car, once again, McLaren are staying with their same driver lineup. Renault's took an Ocon and Ricciardo. Racing Point will probably have the same lineup again for 2020. I would have thought. So, the midfield and Haas, obviously, once again, locked out. So, midfield is unrealistic. Then he's only then got 3 teams that he could join, in theory. Williams, Alfa Romeo, or Red Bull Racing, or Toro Rosso, should I say. And Toro Rosso, not realistic, because he's not a Red Bull Junior driver, plus his age. Then, obviously, that leaves him with Alfa or Williams. Alfa Romeo, again, not realistic. That's a part of the Ferrari Junior program now, really. So, realistically, of course, it's more or less unrealistic for Kubica to move to any other team unless he was staying at Williams. So, what could Kubica go on to do? Well, there is sports outside Formula 1 that I reckon he would be good in. WEC or WEC, as we know it as, World Endurance Racing. How about the World Rally Championship? Would he go back to doing that? I think he'd be pretty good in that anyway. He sort of does have that rally style, of course. But as I was saying, WEC, he could go on to World Endurance Racing Championship, of course. I think he'd be pretty good in that. And, I think he would actually be a bit like Alonso in that, or a top driver in that sense, in WEC. And, if he could secure a drive with Toyota or Audi or one of the top teams in WEC, of course, we know that he could, I think, do very, very well. Because even though he's been, let's say, the worst of all the drivers, he ain't that far off Russell's pace overall, which does show he is still a top driver overall. And if he's a top driver, of course, I think, arguably, of course, being a top driver, he does deserve to be in one of the top tiers, I think, of motorsport. And I think he does have the talent there. He has proven he does have good talent overall at some tracks still. So his talent isn't gone. And I think that he can prove. Another thing I'd like to point out, let's say he went and done, let's say, something else in Formula 1, he could also combine WEC with most Formula 1 teams as well, to a degree, like becoming a test driver. How about becoming a test driver for Ferrari? Ferrari need a test driver for next season. Of course, I think Ferrari still have Brendan Hartley, but Pascal Wehrlein won't be at Ferrari next season, so, he could become a Ferrari test driver. It would be a good move for Robert. And, again, he would still be living that Formula 1 dream, but also at Ferrari. So, obviously, I think, Robert does have opportunities in Formula 1 in different roles, like test driving, I think, personally. But, of course, having said that, I don't think he's good enough to be to be a top driver in a top team or in Formula 1 anymore. And I think his days have gone and have passed, unfortunately. Now, for Williams, what does this mean for Williams? Well, I think, it's a clear seat now. I think the seat has to go to Latifi. Okay, I think we'd all love to see Nico Hülkenberg get the seat overall, but for Nico Hülkenberg, it's a big step back. don't forget. And also another thing for Nico Hülkenberg, will he, want to go to a team like Williams? I'm not sure. But at the same time, it's the only way Nico could salvage his career. But would Williams want him to join or pay for him to join? Because, Nico Hülkenberg ain't going to, let's say, go off to a team that wouldn't probably pay him, being a driver of his calibre. So is Williams really a choice for him, next season for Nico Hülkenberg? I don't think it is. And, it's going to be a real shame to not have Nico Hülkenberg on the grid probably next year. And that's the fact that we're facing right now. Nico Hülkenberg not going to be a Formula 1 driver in 2020, which will be a real shame, actually, coming to look at it. Because, Nico Hülkenberg, I've watched him race since, I think, 2012. That's when he was in Formula 1. No, sorry, 2010. I take that back. 2010 he was in Formula 1 from. And, he was one of them drivers, and is still one of them drivers. He's just world class. Okay, he's been in some unfound situations and unfortunate situations at times. But, that's reality. But coming back to Williams, I think it's got to be Latifi. He's going to be the one with the biggest sponsorship overall. And given that he will have the biggest sponsorship money to give Williams, obviously I don't see how or who else would come into that team. Obviously, Sergei Sorokin, could he be another option, a return to, obviously Williams? Is that a possibility as well? I don't think it is. Probably not, no. So I'm going to just say, the only one that could and probably will get the drive would be Nicholas Latifi, the Canadian, and would be the second Canadian in Formula 1, which would be quite unusual for Formula 1. We haven't had many Canadians in Formula 1 in the past. Certainly not two. I don't think there was ever two at one point in Formula 1. So yeah, pretty unusual, especially in modern era Formula 1, to have two Canadians lining up on the grid next season. But anyway, that's my, thoughts on Robert Kubica. I wish Robert Kubica all the best for 2020 and beyond. And, look, I would love to see him on the grid next season. But the real question you got to always ask yourself, has he got the talent to compete in Formula 1? And let's be honest, let's be realistic, that answer is a sad no. And that's the truth of the matter. Thank you for watching. Until the next time, guys, until the next reaction video, take it easy. Have a good day.